a module that most of your teachers, I think, have probably enjoyed more than anything else. So, we've already done Kahoot 7.1. That's easy. Let's get on. We're talking here about claims. How can a claim be tested? Now, of course, the claim I've got up there is that if you're going to buy a gun for your home, you should buy this one here because it's, it has accident discharge is impossible. Of course, you see a lot, and it was only $6 for this gun. It's obviously a really good one. But, this is a claim made a while ago. And one of the reasons that this is probably a really important module for you guys to understand more than anything else is you get bombarded with hundreds, if not thousands, of stupid claims per week. Okay? In the age of social media, people are pushing crap on you all the time. And so what you've got to do is when someone makes a claim, you've got to be able to test it. And of course, what we've got here is we've got to talk about experimental design, validity. Okay, in this day and age, and is the data reliable? Is the accuracy of the procedure errors? So we've got a whole range of these things here. So validity. And again, we're coming back to stuff we're talking about before. Does the experiment test what it aimed to? Or did it find something else? Okay? So do the data, the inferences, the actions, is everything accurate in that context there? Was the experiment done well? And we'll talk about examples where it wasn't and where people made claims that could not be substantiated. Okay, reliability, is it consistent? And again, we have talked about this previously, and that there. Is it consistent? If you get 20 results and they're all completely different to each other, and then you make an inference from that, is that inference correct? Which probably isn't. Oh, sorry, I skipped. Accuracy, is it close? So one of the things, as you're building your scientific knowledge in stage 4 and 4, or 1 to 5, you think, well, let's determine gravity. Now, if you do gravity and it's 1.5 meters per second, either you're doing your experiment on the moon or your experiment hasn't worked. Okay? So, because, we've got a whole heap of different values there. Random errors, as we said before, just variations in your data. If the random errors of the variation in your data is small, then probably what you're doing is actually a good experiment. But, there's always, in the level that we're doing stuff, and even with professional, like working scientists working with very precise instruments, will have random errors. It's just the nature of what happens there. And of course, our systematic errors, which are basically when you do bad scientific experiments. And I think a lot of scientists are probably guilty of this at one stage or another. And we'll talk about some of the reasons for that a little bit later as well. Because science is not this magical thing that we present to you in junior school and say, scientists are very accurate, they do this, that, and that. Science is done by humans, and humans are flawed. Okay, so we've got here a claim that this little thing here actually helps you with a cold. Now, at the moment, I've got a bit of a cold and a flu, and I've been taking a few variations of drugs here. It does look a bit bad here, this is my pile of drugs that I just grabbed this morning. I've only had a few of the white ones. And it's got the throat lozenges there, just in case my voice does give out later on. But I've gone to a chemist and I've bought some cold and flu medication. It's over the counter, there's nothing wrong with it. It's basically just drying up everything and stopping me doing that there. Here, if you have a look at the first few lines there, what might tell you that the veracity, let's use a fancy word, the efficacy of this product may not be as good as it's claimed. It's actually in the first line. Wrigley's. What do Wrigley's produce mainly? Chewing gum. So what you've got here is a chewing gum company promoting this thing here that I think it's essentially chewing gum with extra vitamin C. Now, vitamin C has been shown to have some effect on cold and flu. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you chew this stuff here, and it's actually an effervescent. It's Berocca. It's Berocca with a little bit of extra vitamin C in it, and that's going to help you with all your colds and flus. They had to pay out $23 million. Now I think this is in the US. They made a claim that this was going to help with cold and flus, and it may, but there was no scientific data behind it. And this is the thing. You get bombarded with these ads all the time. And we're going to look at a few examples of things where studies have been shown to be false, studies have been shown to be overblown, and that there. This one here, we're going to talk about sample size. So we talked about it briefly before, and this is a really important thing as well, because the sample size and who you sample can influence your results. So here's an interesting little thing here. You might notice, and you guys get access to all these slides and everything later on. Yes, teachers have been given access to them all, and you can have them there. But you notice here in the thing, I try and put, if I just grab something from the internet, I'll put it there. I've given you a lot of the information I've got here has come from Wikipedia. I know some of your teachers will say it's an evil resource or it's not a valid resource. It's actually quite good just for scientific information. If you try to find political information or information on Kim Kardashian, it's probably not the best source. But the scientific stuff on here is actually pretty accurate. And you can also, if you change that EN there, that's the thing in front of Wikipedia tells you the language it's in. If you take EN out and put the word simple in there, for most of the articles in English and the science-based articles, it actually gives you a simplified version of the page. It's not every single page, but I've actually found it, particularly because I've been doing the IS, the New Physics and the Extension Science course, when I'm trying to, because I've got to try and review statistics again after 25 years, if I go to the simple page, it actually gives you a really simple answer. It's like, oh yeah, that's it. And then you can go to the complex one. But here, sampling bias. Again, I gave the example before. If I wanted to work out how well today went, and I just asked the group of people from my school, they'd probably give me a positive thing. Now, they may be accurate, but you've got to think here. And I've got a little example here. And this is something that appears later in Module 8. Now, if we're going to ask a question of people, should Indigenous people be compensated for traditional medicines being commercialised? Now, if I ask this room here, is there anyone who's got an Indigenous background? No, whether you do or don't, but you think here, should this group of people be asked about, should you be asked about Indigenous medicines? Well, you could be, but you would probably have to also. So if we ask that group there, bunch of white people, they're probably going to say, well, yeah, why the hell not? If it's going to make me better. You ask these guys from 100 years ago, and I think this is a photo from probably about 100, 120 years ago, they're probably going to be a little bit different on that. Now, I'm not going to debate the merits of what people did in the past and that there, but it's an extreme example of asking different groups of people, or even testing people. So if we go back to our happy middle class white family here, and you tested them for diabetes. You said the prevalence of diabetes in this group here, and you do it and say, well, diabetes happens in one of those people. Probably that guy there. He looks a little bit too happy. So, but one of the things there from history will tell you that if we go to this other group here, which is our second sample group, we might actually say that 90% of them have diabetes, because in Aboriginal communities, and it is because of poor lifestyle choice and that there's a huge amount of type 2 diabetes in Aboriginal things there. If we looked at two groups in separation, there's sample bias. What you need to do is actually go to basically some other data here. You've also got sample size. If we're going to look at the prevalence of diabetes, type 2 diabetes in Indigenous communities, even looking back at our two groups here, we're not going to get much useful data really, because these guys here aren't an Aboriginal community. They are, but it's only a small group. So sample size, you have to think, is the sample going to be good enough to get data? But you also, probably if you're going to do type 2 diabetes, you probably don't want to sample 23 million people. Now that would give you a very accurate background data, but I think the census, does anyone know how, the census probably costs about $1 billion every 4 years to do. It's very expensive. So if you want to ask a question, you're not going to ask 23 million people, okay? Of course, one of the things here, and this comes up a little bit later as well, I know my class are probably sick of hearing me talk about the measles, mumps, rubella thing there. The MMR vaccine, it allegedly caused autism, except that it doesn't. And this whole thing here, which MMR supposedly causes autism, was based on a sample size of 12. The guy, Andrew Wakefield, I can't call him doctor anymore because he's been stripped of his medical credentials. He did a study on 12 children. Those 12 children had bowel inflammations allegedly caused by the MMR. Now, that's probably not debatable. Probably these kids did have a bowel reaction to the MMR. His final thing here, and this is where you can go back to that whole thing, was his hypothesis validated by his data, is that the MMR caused a bowel inflammation which caused autism in the brain. Okay, autism is pretty much, it's still a lot of misunderstood stuff there, but essentially it is a brain condition where the person the part of your brain that doesn't deal with social things there doesn't function as well. But that has been based on a study of 12 children in the late 70s. Now you think there, is that a reasonable sample size to make those? No. Yeah, it's not. And this is the problem here. This guy made a huge amount of money. Now, of course, in the US, there's been a whole heap this year because the US is pretty much the home of this anti-vaccination movement. Now, I'm not going to say vaccinations in certain conditions do cause reactions. There are children who've had some very severe and debilitating reactions to any vaccine. But what has happened there is that it's a 1 in 10,000 chance. Already this year in the US, I think 10,000 children have died of measles-related complications. Now, you need to check me on that because I've just grabbed that number from the back of my head. But then there is a huge amount, there's probably a dozen kids in Australia have died from measles-related. Byron Bay, not Byron Bay, what's the place up north, New South Wales? A lot of hippie hipsters. Byron Bay, yeah. Byron Bay is actually, there's a lot of alternative lifestyle things going on there. I'm not going to judge you for your lifestyle. That's for other people to do. But Byron Bay has actually had a huge number of measles outbreaks because people who tend to live in that community there tend not to vaccinate their kids. It is also, look, and that's the thing, you can probably need to call me up on those numbers as well. I'm just spouting stuff at you just because I'm standing up as I'm an expert on it. But this is an example where sample size probably wasn't big enough. Now, of course, as well, a lot of this stuff here, a lot of these claims use emotions. When I was probably about your age as well, there was a whole heap of stuff. So Bob Geldof was making a lot of, not money, but I think Live Aid, was that 1988? 84? 85? It was an 80s thing. It was a whole heap of people there, well, probably even before your mum and dad held hands a lot. What are you guys born in? Oh God, you guys are born in 2001 or something, aren't you? 2002. God, I'm getting old. But there, this whole thing in Africa. And of course, it is very sad because Africa is not much better these days than it was in the mid-80s. In fact, you could argue that it's got a lot worse. For 30 odd years, the Western world has been trying to help this supposed areas of third world problems, and we haven't done it. But the point here is that this is an ad here, and that's their water supply. This was a thing about getting people to donate money, which I'm not going to say is a bad thing. It's a very altruistic thing to do. But, it's not necessarily worked really well. Emotional advertising is a way of trying to convince you. Emotion, and that's, that's 99% of advertising is in triggering an emotional response. So we're going here. This is actually also an example of a failed advert thing here. Yeah. Yes, you can see the hidden, or it's not so hidden misogyny in here. Look like a girl, act like a girl, think like a man, work like a boss. Bic promoted a whole heap of pink pens. They were saying, oh, we're being very inclusive. You girls can write as well as anyone else. Okay? Probably, yeah. When I was going through school, there was a lot of girls can do anything adverts and that there. Unfortunately, and I don't think this ad is very old. Here as well, another African ad. And of course, this is here. And of course, this is saying here, this is even Bangladesh, which is kind of a little bit out. That was the thing. When we were focusing on Africa, we didn't realise that half of Asia is living in a third world conditions. Okay, and some of you have family backgrounds from Asia and India and Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, all those sort of areas there as well. And what we've got there is an emotional thing. Okay. And of course, as well, we have one here that a work health and safety. I was new and afraid to ask, and now half my arm is missing. These are ads. These are like the smoking ads. Deliberately trying to give you an emotional response so that you will feel guilty and act on it. Advertising is about making you feel guilty about doing something or not doing it. Of course, health claims. This is an Australian health claim. I was going to say those you have kids. I'm not going to make the obvious we're in Campbelltown joke. But here, Heinz in Australia. Heinz in Australia had to pay out a hell of a lot of money for this product here, which is called Fruit and Veg Shreds. Oh, doesn't it look healthy? A little munchkin's climbing a giant apple to go into the tree. Marketed at 1 to 3 years old. And of course, 99% fruit and veg. That looks really healthy, doesn't it? Except that when you look at it, it has, I know it's not the best thing here, but you can see there, per 100 grams of product, it's 68.7 grams sugar. So it makes its claim, you can see it here. Oh, apple paste, 36%. Apple paste is basically you pretty much take all the sugar out and you put it into a paste. So you take out all the water, you take out all that. You then put in apple juice concentrate, which is again, you take out most of the water. Essentially what you end up, berry puree, do the same thing, sweet corn, fruit and pumpkin puree. Essentially you take out a lot of, and sometimes they take out the dietary fibre, which is the healthy part of the fruit and the veg. So if you have orange juice, it's really good, except that all you've got in there is a bit of orange stuff and a bit of water and a lot of sugar. Heinz, I think, I'm trying off the top of my head, they're saying, it's really thing here. This is the other thing, emotion. When you become a mother or something like that, I think 90% of the adverts to mothers are all about making you feel guilty, that if you don't use our product, you're obviously abusing your child. It's this guilty mum syndrome, where if you're not doing this, then you're obviously giving your, there's an ad on at the moment that says something about give your child the best start in life. What is it? It's basically baby formula, but they're promoting it to 8-year-olds. So it's like baby formula is there if the kid can't, and like a lot of and this is where it's guilty mother syndrome. It's like a lot of mothers, for a lot of medical reasons, other reasons, can't breastfeed. So you use baby formula to substitute that. But now, is it Aptamil Plus or something? It's something stupid like that. But now they're saying that you're a toddler, you're in school for 3 years. You should be giving them baby formula. It's like, no, you should just be giving them a healthy diet. So this is where you have to, as people studying science, have to understand that 90% of this crap is crap. You've got to be able to look beyond that stuff and say that, well, no, this is crap, you're talking crap. Now, speaking of crap, this is probably the biggest one in the last few years. Nurofen. I hope most of your teachers will probably talk to you about this anyway. Nurofen, ibuprofen is a drug, and the biochemist can help me here. I think it reduces inflammation. Yep, reduces inflammation. So if it reduces your headache, joint pains and things like that. Nurofen got into a lot of trouble in the last few years because you buy a packet of Nurofen. If you go to the chemist's warehouse or something like that, you can buy a packet of ibuprofen, 100 or something for about $5. Nurofen, who are the ones I think own the original patent, said, oh, that's really great, but we've improved our ibuprofen, and now we have targeted pain relief. So this one here targets your migraine. This one here allegedly targets your tension headache, which is probably the one most teachers at the end of the day would like to have. This one here, period pain. This one here, back pain. So if you're a female teacher who's on their period and they've been standing all day, you probably need to take all 4 of those. However, let's go back to the start. And I want you not to look at what the thing is. I want you to have a look here. Fast targeted relief from pain. Ibuprofen lysine, 342 grams. Let's for our migraines. For our tension, ibuprofen lysine, 342 grams. That is the active ingredient. Let's go to our period. Oh, we just need 342 grams. Let's go again to our back pain. When we get over here, there we go. And, funnily enough, 342 grams. Those 4 things, which supposedly are targeted relief, are the exact same pill. Nurofen were charging at least double the normal thing there. I probably should have added there that the normal Nurofen is ibuprofen lysine, 342 grams. These were, Nurofen charged people double. I've got my period. Oh, I need to have this. I'm going to get a migraine very soon. I've got this here. My back is hurting. I need this. It is the exact same drug. Now, of course, the stupid thing is, the makers of Nurofen were, I think the fine they got was $1.5 million. Choice estimated that the targeted relief things were $20 million. Do you think Nurofen is still selling those? Because they're going to pay their $1 million fine every couple of years because they're making $20 million a year on this targeted relief stuff. So hopefully you can say, next time your mum says, well, I've got it back, I'm going to do this. No, get that stuff there. It's the exact same active ingredient. And this is why you have to be careful. The makers of Nurofen are a big pharmaceutical company that are worth billions, if not trillions of dollars. And they're trying to screw you over. And we as a populace are letting them do here. Here, this is a thing here. Anyone know what homeopathy is? Homeopathy, it's one of those hippie things. You go to Byron Bay, they'll be doing homeopathy up there. Homeopathy is, oh, you're allergic to egg. So what we're going to do is we're going to a little bit of egg essence, we're going to mix it in some water, and then we're going to mix it again in more water and more water. Then we're going to give it to you, and you're going to feel better. And it's used in a lot of things there, and probably a few people are angry at me now because you probably use it a little bit there. But in England, this woman here was saying she was using homeopathy to vaccinate children. Now, there was and I should have put this up here, and someone can help me here. I think there was a case in Perth where parents were actually jailed because they tried to treat their child who had a very serious disease with homeopathy. The kid unfortunately died. And so this is why I can make jokes about this, but this is a serious thing. And there's a thing, I think France in the last week, France used to give rebates to homeopathy treaters. So if you went to get homeopathy, you'd get like a Medicare rebate in France. They've now stopped that, because they pretty much recognise that this does very little, if nothing. Okay, and so this person here basically got prosecuted. There you go, fined $138,000. Oh, so this is, this is in the Central Coast. So Central Coast, Gosford Way, up that way there. And this is the thing here, homeopathy. I always giggle to myself when I drive past there near the shopping area where I live. There's a clairvoyant, and it's the sign, bookings only. Like if she's really a clairvoyant, she should know I'm coming. But yeah, you try that with them, she's going to yell at me probably. And so here is the thing here, homeopathy is only 100 and odd years old. Okay, it doesn't work. What it does do, and this is the thing here that we'll talk about, it's a placebo. And this is the thing, the brain is a wonderful thing. If you think you're better, you're going to be better. It's a bit of a growth mindset for your body. Who here has had growth mindset thrown at them? Yes. I actually got my class to look at the data and growth mindset. It's a very small sample size. But let's go over here. This is one of my favourite graphics of all time. So here, we're going to look at how data can be misunderstood. Now, one of the things, if you want to stop drowning, you have to actually stop Nicolas Cage starring in movies. This is an example of where data can be used to show something that isn't true. Now this is, if you want to look here, this is a website called Spurious Correlations. The guy's done this brilliant job of collecting all this data, and actually you put a few variables in there and it will show you a whole heap of things that graphically look as though they're true. So this one here, between, what's that? Should move that out of the way. Oh, there. What do we got there? Between 1999 and 2009, Nicolas Cage starred in a whole heap of films. Nicolas Cage actually won an Oscar, didn't he, for Best Supporting Actor or something, way long ago. He's now just crazy. He just appears in crazy films. But the years that he's appeared in a lot of films have meant that more people have drowned by falling into pools. Does that mean Nicolas Cage causes that? No. That is a thing. There is a correlation. There seems to be a correlation, but they are not linked. There is no cause. Science is about trying to find causal relationships. This causes this, not that this appears to be like this. Another one there. Do you know global warming is caused by the decrease in pirates? There's a graph there that proves it. Look here, between, what have we got here? What's that first one? 1820. There were thought to be about 35,000 pirates in the world. The global average temperature was just above 14 degrees. Every year that the number of pirates, so it's a reverse graph here, every year that the pirates have gone down, global warming, the average temperature has gone up. Now there are plenty of problems with this graph. It is an absurd graph. It doesn't actually have a linear thing on the bottom here, which we could do that there. But there is a correlation, but there is no causation. If we suddenly increase the number of pirates, global warming is not going to go down. Although maybe it might, because maybe people would travel less. So let's have a look here. Placebos. What's a placebo? Anyone? Placebo? Yeah, I don't think we need to say it's an English independent rock band for the last 20 years. No, that doesn't work. Double-blind trials. What's that? Yeah. So this is double-blind trials used in the pharmaceutical industry. So you want to try and find a drug that works. You have to test it against a placebo because, as we said there, placebos often work because people feel, as soon as they start taking a drug, they feel, oh, I'm feeling better now, even though control groups. Now, let's quickly go here. So placebo is just, basically a placebo is I give you a pill with nothing in it. And this is the thing, you don't realise that 99% of a pill is basically just chalky material, it's filler material. So you're just given a pill or a treatment that has nothing active in it. So that Nurofen there, 342 micrograms. That's, seriously, you wouldn't be able to see that in the pill. It's just dispersed in the filler material. And so you use the placebo to see, is the drug doing it or is the treatment? So you might be getting a treatment that involves you on a respirator. Does the actual respirator work or does the treatment work? We've also got double blind, as we said here. The person giving you the drug or the treatment doesn't know whether you're getting the drug or the treatment, which means, because otherwise, you're going to have a think. If I was going to give you guys over here a treatment for cancer and you guys weren't, and you guys are going to be awesome, it's not a problem. Take the drug, it'll be good. Take the drug, maybe it'll work. We'll just see how it goes. See there, my bias would say you guys are going to be great, you guys might be all right. And that can influence what's happening in that drug trial. And a control group is the one given the placebo. Now, of course, the problem is a lot of people do get upset if they're in a trial like this because they might, it's particularly cancer treatment. Some people might, particularly this is done in really advanced cancer treatments. If someone's given them placebo, there's probably a chance they're going to die. Okay, but you need to have this information, unfortunately, otherwise people are not going to be able to get there. Societal economic influences. Now, predicting variation in climate. This is probably the biggest political, social, economic at the moment. Remedies for health conditions, again, the reason this is bad or this is a problem is that people are just trying to make money off you. Manipulating statistical data. So here, we go back here. This is a bit of data I've suggested for you from climate change. It's wrong. This is the actual data. And one of the things here, this is the data, this is Australia between 1900 and about 2015. Now, you look at the data on that range there, you can quite obviously say, okay, it seems that the average air temperature, so the average air temperature is this one here, that's the one that varies the most. And you got here sea surface temperature, sea surface temperature there, and you got here 10-year average. So what you got there, the thick lines are the averages. The thin lines are the measured results at any one time. Now, of course, you've got to be very careful with data because we can say at the moment that we've had this winter probably about 2 to 3 weeks that was really cold. However, you would say on average, you know, I'm walking around now in a t-shirt, some of you are doing the same. We're in the middle of winter and it's actually not that cold outside. Okay? So in that case there, what you have to do is look at the averages. You can say here, and this, there we go here. If you look here, this graph here, between 1955 and 1970, it didn't really go up. You can say there between 1942 and 1955, the average went down. Why do you think it went down in that time? Because of the war. Yeah. Basically, at the end of World War II, there was a huge, one of the things, world wars are really good for stopping climate going up. A lot of people die. The more people die, the less resources you need. But then you had here, why am I pointing there? You had here in the 1960s, it goes up. This is what's called the baby boom, where post-World War II, all countries said, just procreate as much as you can. Just procreate, we need it. John Howard did it in about 2000 when he gave everyone baby bonuses for TVs and stuff. You look here, that plateaus. Any bit of data, if you look at data over a very short period of time compared to a long period of time, it looks as though there's more variation than there is. Okay, now look, in all honesty, and I know I've had discussions with people in the past about this, we can't really deny there is an increase, there is a change in global temperatures. Now, some people will say, oh, just natural swings and balances. We're not going to get into that there. But the reality is that the temperature has gone up since the Industrial Revolution. Okay, there is a causation. one of the things there, and this is where it's all about societal and economic factors, petrochemical companies, and I think there's about 3 or 4 of them in the world, they're very wealthy. And so they have a vested interest in saying climate change isn't actually that big a deal. Of course, these are the same petrochemical companies that in 50 years' time will probably be selling solar panels, or in 20 years, 10 years' time. Health. Health is a really important thing there. As I said, I've got my stash of drugs over here. It's all over-the-counter medicine. But there's been a lot of interesting things here, and this relates back to Module 8 as well. The vitamin company Blackmores, which I think comes out of Tasmania, Blackmores made a huge amount of money in the last 10 years because of the need for Chinese people to have baby formula. I think it was Blackmores made a huge amount of money. They're one of the world's biggest baby formula suppliers, and this whole thing about China wanting good quality baby formula, because apparently the Chinese baby formula's got a lot of residual chemicals and stuff in it. Blackmores, they make a lot of money off vitamins. They also pay universities to do studies. And so there was one, and this happened, here. So Blackmores funded Sydney Uni for, I think it was, there you go, $1.3 million. So Sydney Uni got nearly $1.5 million from Blackmores to do research. You also have here as well, and this is a more recent one, that Sydney University had to actually retract research. And this is only recent here, and they said elderberries help fight cold and flu symptoms. Now there is some evidence that, because elderberries have a high amount, I think they have a high amount of vitamin C in them, they can help. But what was happening here is that this research paper got retracted because essentially, if you read the article, the researchers took some tissue cultures of some cells that were infected with the flu and put elderberry juice on them. The elderberry juice apparently killed the flu, what's the word? Pathogens, killed the pathogens. Therefore, elderberry supplements can actually fight off colds and flus. Now the problem here, not so much that the research is wrong, but they've jumped a couple of steps. They've gone from saying that a cell is killed by elderberry or a pathogen's killed by elderberry juice to saying elderberry supplements can actually cure the cold. There's a few steps in between there. And so Sydney Uni actually requested the paper be withdrawn. There was also another issue there that the original paper didn't say that the pharmaceutical company actually paid for the research. If you read the article, I think it's a company called Pharmacare, and I think Pharmacare is one of the big ones there. And they funded the research but said, oh, we don't want to be on the paper, even though we funded the research, gave you all the labs and gave you some of our scientists. But we don't want to be accredited for it. We just want to sell the elderberry supplements later on. And this is a really big thing as well. Like, just because you can pay for research doesn't mean that it's going to be there. So we're going to have a look at a few of these graphs here. Statistics are manipulated to prove anything. 11 out of 10 people will tell you that. Let's go back to our graphs here. Sorry, I'm walking too far away. This one here. Letters in winning. So, spelling bees are a huge thing in the US. But the bigger the word in the spelling bee competition, the more likely people are going to be killed by venomous spiders in a year. No, there's no correlation. Japanese cars sold in the US, suicides by crashing motor vehicles. Oh, that one seems, the Japanese have a culture of, what's it called, harikari, where they suicide bombers, and if you bring shame on your family, you must kill yourself. But there's really no correlation. Oil imports from Norway and drivers killed in collisions. These are bits of data that do not relate, but you put them on a graph, they look like they correlate. And US spending on space technology and suicide. Absolutely no correlation. But this is the thing here. We can laugh at this now, but in terms of people are present company accepted, people are pretty stupid. One of the things here, and a lot of this stuff does come from the US, the United States is also a thing there which is embraced, every second TV show is a forensic science magic show, where forensic science can solve everything. And the US has a whole range of stuff where forensics is used. Forensics is fallible. Okay, that's the interesting thing there. But what happens there is that people who are on juries and that are dazzled by magical science stuff. If you get a guy there in a lab coat saying, I think this, everyone's like, oh, well, if they've got a lab coat on, they must be smart. Okay? If you can go by that logic, go into your HSC exam wearing a lab coat for every exam. You'll be great. Now, of course, this is where you have to think about evidence, data, all these things here. If you are using YouTube as a source of reference, then you're going to go into every exam and say the Earth is flat. We're going to storm Area 51. I know if those of you who are following your influencers on Instagram, most influencers are pretty stupid people. But let's go on here. One of the things I said there before about placebos. Placebos are also part of this thing. You would have studied this thing called the Hawthorne effect. Now, the Hawthorne effect came about, a factory wanted to improve performance. And so they said, this group here are going to do method B, this group are going to do method A, and everyone knew they were being looked at. If you know you're in a study and you know you're being looked at, you're going to try and improve. Okay, you're going to try and work harder. And that's what the Hawthorne effect is, that people will work harder if they know they're being watched. I know I'd say less dodgy things when I know I'm being filmed, okay, because that's going to be published. You also have there, probably you'll notice if your mother or significant other gets to a certain age and they'll get a bit more moody. And that's a thing called the menopause, which is caused by that thing, a lot of changes in the woman's body. They lose menstruation, yay, and then they get really even more moodier. But, I know, I'm going to offend a few people there. But one of the things there was a study done that linked hormone replacement therapy. So when people get menopause, a lot of body changes happen, and so a lot of women are recommended to have hormone replacement therapy. One of the things there, it supposedly stops things like osteoporosis. It also balances up the hormones a little bit there. Now, there was a study done which linked HRT to coronary heart disease. And this is, again, like the stuff with MMR and a lot of the other stuff there. One small study, then promoted doctors to say, well, look, we're going to take you off HRT because I'm worried about your heart. Now, a lot of post-studies from that have shown it's not so much the HRT. The coronary heart disease is linked to people who can afford HRT because apparently early on HRT was very expensive. So the people who could afford the HRT were people who were well off and lived a pretty decadent existence. It's an example of where socioeconomic status as well can affect that. Similar to that sort of argument we used before with the Aboriginal stuff there. The Mozart effect. I know a couple of kids in my class were actually think, well, that's actually not too bad just listening to this music and relaxing. The Mozart effect is, basically that listening to Mozart for some reason helps it. It was done with 36 students. 36 students were part of this. Now, you could also argue that, and for some reason it's 10 minutes of D major. You don't want a minor key to do your musical stuff with. Minor keys, for those who've studied music, are the depressing ones. Your major keys are your very happy music and stuff like that there. And I think a sonata, and I actually studied music in school, but not for a very long time. Sonatas are kind of short, happy pieces. And so the same thing, if you want to listen to, I don't know, what's a popular bit of music now? What? I'm old, I don't know modern music. I don't want to know it, it's scary. But Okay, the one thing I can think of, like, and it's a bit of a dubious one, Pharrell Williams' Happy from about 3-4 years ago. Really happy song. If you listen to that, you're probably going to have happy vibes. If you're listening to something else, it may not be there. But what this study showed is that it wasn't necessarily the Mozart. I've got to admit, I'm a person that when I'm trying to work on something, I don't really have to study, but I have to prepare a lot of stuff for you guys to study. I put my headphones on, and for me to work effectively, I actually have to listen to some, usually some Metallica or Megadeth. Something that's going at about 140 beats per minute. I actually really focus very well with that. It's just something in my brain. You might focus listening to your K-pop or something stupid like that. Yeah, listening to your BTS. Isn't half of South Korea in BTS? There's about 500 of them on stage. But this is the key thing here. This is the key thing here. Further studies showed that people had the same effect if they liked reading Stephen King novels and they listened to a spoken Stephen King book. They improved. If they liked Schubert, they liked anything else, that affected. So effectively what the Mozart effect showed, if you're listening to something you enjoy, it helps you focus. Okay? So it's really not the Mozart, it's the thing there. Now, here, how does reporting of science influence your own feelings? This is wrapping up a lot of the stuff we've been talking about. So, contemporary science debate, and this is the debate thing here. One of the things there, and this is what you need to really think about, when someone is showing you, and this is, you should be doing this with me as well. I'm throwing a lot of info at you. Am I accurate? Am I reliable? Is the information, yes? Let me finish. Lunch?
Yeah.
Okay.
Just if you want, we can have a 45-minute break.
Yeah, what's the time now?
It's 12:30.
12:30, give me 5, give me,
Half an hour break.
yeah.
And then
Yeah, that's cool. Just, we'll finish this point here and then we'll finish on this. Is there reliable information? As I said earlier, YouTube is not a thing here. Vaccines cause autism. Jenny McCarthy. Does anyone know who Jenny McCarthy is? She's a blonde celebrity whose son has autism. And she, because, well, basically she's blonde, attractive, and has a couple of other assets that help her in the American market. Because she is that person there, she gets people listen to her more. Vaccines cause autism. No, they do not. Another one, nuclear power is safe. Now that is a very big debate. Nuclear power does not cause greenhouse gases. However, when a nuclear reactor goes bad, it goes really bad. Okay? Now, I think what we're going to do, we're going to leave that there for the moment. Lunch is out there. Let's get back in here at 1:15. We're in the second half of Module 7, and we've got these 4 terms to define. So, theory, hypothesis, belief, and law. Now, of course, we did that quick little quiz before. Theory is basically a way of testing what's going on. Okay, it explains things. Theory, this is one of the things, particularly with climate change, theory of evolution and things like that. People often confuse it and say, well, oh, it's just a theory, it can't be true. In science, a theory is something that's been tested over and over again, and it's been confirmed many, many times. We don't need to go into it too much, but if you go into extension science, you talk about falsifiability and that, but I don't want to confuse you too much today. Hypothesis. Okay, proposed explanation. Basically, a hypothesis is something you can test. Okay, it has to be something that is testable. If you just say, I think all black cats are bad, that might be a hypothesis, you might think that. How the hell do you test it? Okay, so it's not a scientific idea because it can't be tested. Where we go? Belief, something that's true, often based on revelation. So, of course, not that I want to besmirch anyone's religious beliefs or anything like that there. The difference between a theory and a belief, essentially, is a theory can be tested, a belief can't. Okay, and that's just, you believe thing. I believe black cats are bad. Actually, I believe all cats are bad, but that's because I'm slightly allergic to them. What we also have is going over here a law. And of course, a law is something that's been shown time and time again to be true. Okay? Doesn't matter how many times it's been tested, it's never been shown to be false. Okay? And so theory and law are two important things. Basically, a law essentially tells you what happens. A theory kind of tries to explain why it happens. Of course, we've got peer review and popular science. Now, one of the things there, it's real. A lot of people now in the social media age, I subscribe to whatever science blog, which may be a flat earth blog or something stupid like that. Now, of course, one of the things as well in the social media age and the 24-hour news cycle is that all these news channels and all these newspapers have to actually use content. And so you get things like this. So sat-nav switches off parts of the brain. It's just a study done. I don't think it's ever been repeated. But, it's the same sort of thing. It's probably the same thing that says anyone who uses a smartphone is stupid or whatever. Okay? Media, and this article here is about that. The media sees one report. So that elderberry thing we talked about at USyd, the media reported on that because there was a report. It's the University of Sydney. They're trustworthy. Let's report on it. No one in the media actually goes and fact checks much. So all you have to do is release a report, which we'll talk about a little bit later, and you can pretty much get people to talk about that. Of course, the influences on science. The tobacco industry and lung cancer. That is one of the biggest ones there, the fact that up until about 30 years ago, cigarette companies basically suppressed all the information that said smoking caused lung cancer. They had research that showed it, but they suppressed it because they were making a lot of money. You also have as well the fossil fuel industry and climate change, and it's not just me talking about it, this is in the syllabus. And the fact is, yes, the fossil fuel companies do have a lot of money, okay? You also have their commercial industries just putting things on market. In the age of eBay and all this here, all you have to do is get your Instagram influence people to spruik your product. I think the Kardashians go at about $1 million a post or something. And suddenly everyone wants your giant product. And of course, one in the as well, and we'll talk about there, asbestos mining. Okay, so asbestos is a material that's a fire retardant, and it used to be mined. So, I'm going to go through this really, really quickly. This is just a snippet of research there, and you're saying like in the 50s, they knew that there was a link, and the link was suppressed because there was a hell of a lot of money to be made. And I think I've got a thing here. Oh, no, I don't. I thought I had another slide there. Late 50s, science privately accepted. Basically, some doctors were paid off. Again, the fallibility. You think your doctor's perfect, but they're going to make a money. Here we go. I went too far. Fossil fuel industry and climate change. A few articles here. They're holding major fossil blah, 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 blah. Basically, in the US, funnily enough, when we talk about science denialism, we end up talking about the US. In the US, pretty much every anti-climate change thing is funded by a fossil fuel company. They usually do it through shelf companies, and then they do that there. Commercial, now, here's the one here. I know my class got upset when we first talked about this, and they probably have seen the picture and know where we're going. One of the things here, guilt, as I said earlier, guilt is a big thing in advertising. So here's an ad probably from the late 1800s, early 1900s. And girls, if you want that man to love you, you need to use this soap. skin you love to touch. It's a bit, in the age of Me Too, it's probably a little bit creepy. Another big court case in the US, the weed killer Roundup, which is a chemical called glycophosphate. Guy who had been, I think he was a college or a high school groundskeeper, sued. Does anyone know what the company was? The company who makes Roundup. Sued them and won, I think it was $210 million because he developed this really rare cancer. Now that's being verified and there's a whole heap of stuff there, but it's still an example where a chemical is put in there. I'll give you another example. DDT is a pesticide or herbicide, pesticide can cover it all, which is used to stop crops from being destroyed by pests. Banned in most countries, China still uses it. And I think it was linked to some birth defects and things like that. The other one there, and I've done this, and some of you may have done as well, chemical in the 60s called thalidomide. Thalidomide, some people, I can hear a couple of things there. Thalidomide was put onto market, was rushed onto market as a way of stopping women from getting morning sickness. Get pregnant, some people get very, very sick. They hadn't tested it properly, and a good majority of people who used it ended up having children with severe birth defects because they hadn't studied it. And there is a huge rush to get something to market. Now, asbestos mining and lung cancer, one of the things there, Australia used to be, I think, one of the biggest exporters of asbestos. If you live in a really old fibro home, you're probably living with some asbestos. And it's not dangerous unless you try and move it, because it doesn't catch fire, okay? Of course, asbestos lung cancer, essentially what it does, it causes a thing called asbestosis, which is the fibres, it's got tiny little crystal fibres, and they go into your lungs. They stay in there, your body can't get rid of them, and you eventually develop a disease called mesothelioma, which is essentially basically having your lungs fill up with fluid, and that. It's like having a flu, but 1,000 times worse, and you're pretty much dead. Of course, there is a big problem in Australia at the moment. There is another thing there. Who at home has a marble or a granite bench top in their house? Yep, I'm going to berate you now. No, not really. There's a big problem there. To make those things there, people have to grind them and do all this here. There's a big thing at the moment. It's happening in Queensland. I think that's one of the biggest sources there. And it's a disease called silicosis. When someone grinds up a bit of rock and that gets into the air and you breathe it in, that goes into your lungs and it doesn't get removed. And apparently it's even worse than mesothelioma. It kills people within 5 years. So just something for you to keep there. And this is what I'm saying here. Silicosis epidemic. Basically a ton of people, if you're grinding, and it's the same thing, if you're doing anything, if you're doing any sculpturing with rocks, I don't know, doing anything with rocks and that's getting into the air, just be very careful, wear a face mask. Of course, you also have this thing here called the halo effect. And this is where, sorry, I can hear, sorry, Natasha. Anyway, so what you've got here, you've got celebrities endorsing products, or popular brands making misleading claims. Here is an actress by the name of Gwyneth Paltrow. On the right-hand side, she actually, she makes millions out of movies and crap like that. And she is also a very big wellness person. So she believes a lot of your problems are because you're not well and your chakras are a bit misaligned and that. And so she has this online website called Goop, which is all about wellness. Anyone know what that product is there on the right? Yes, you know. I can tell the people who know because they're all squirming a little bit now. She got in trouble a few years ago because that is a piece of jade that's molded into it's formed in the shape of an egg, and basically the ladies are supposed to insert that in a part of their body to ensure cleanliness. Yes. And yes, it is, and it is exactly where you think it's going to be inserted. It's a female body part, it's not in the males. Except, yeah, I can see a few people haven't seen it squirming. Inserting anything up in that part of your body is not good, particularly not a thing made of a mineral, because some minerals have different compositions. Some minerals, if you insert it into a part of your body that's got a mucus, because the mucus part of your body, lips, rear end, front end for some people, are actually very absorbent. And so any toxins that is in that there is going to get absorbed into your body. She eventually had to take that down. I think last time I looked, it was no longer for sale. You've got here everyone's famous person for not being famous. Kim Kardashian. Look, I don't think she's ever met a product that she's not willing to sell. This one here, which is, yes, I'm sure that's been photoshopped a few times, that image. That her brand was selling lollipops that were diet lollipops. If you know anything about biology, anything that's a lollipop, and of course the biggest thing here, you know, some of you eat lollies here, it's good for your energy short term. You go buy a chop, what's it, $1.50 or something? She's selling these things for $30. $30. I think the reason the diet works with this is because you can't afford anything else to eat. But again, people actually believe, oh my God, Kim Kardashian, she's so whatever the hell she is. She's a person that's famous for being famous. This one here, what we got here? Rice Krispies, or what are they called in Australia? Rice Bubbles. It's one of those things I had in there. One of the things there, next time you're in the supermarket, look at the cereal aisle. I think Wheat Bix are about the only cereal there that can actually claim to be reasonably healthy. Every single other cereal is just full of sugar. And so here, this is Rice Bubbles. Boosts your child's immunity. A, B, C, and E. 25% antioxidants, nutrients. It is not illegal just to throw those words onto a thing, because pretty much everything you eat can be a nutrient of some description. And so Kellogg's were told to take that off there. Similar sort of claim to the shred stuff we talked about before. Anti-aging cream that had to be photoshopped in the ad. Doesn't say a lot for your product when you have to Photoshop the person doing it. Yeah. Yeah. In the early days of the internet, you couldn't open your email without some product like this here. There was an Australian company that I think they still are in business there. But basically, sex sells. It's either you have an attractive person or you trying to say to someone, you're obviously not very good at the sex, so we're going to give you this product that's going to make you better at it, or whatever. And this is a US one. And I'm sure most of you have done this, you watch the ads after midnight, they get very interesting very quickly. But every single one of those products has been sold. It has been bought by people. Particularly on the Goop stuff there, they say, oh, it's going to align your chakra or something like that. They don't work. There's no evidence behind them. Talking about pseudoscientific claims. Astrology. Okay, no one's going to put their hand up if I say, who read their star sign today? There is no evidence that astrology works. Astrology says that the stars influence you. That's not how gravity and light and everything works. Numerology. If you add up the letters in your name, they give you a number which tells you your success. And you've got the other one, iridology, which looking at your eye, so your eye tells you, it's a bit like palmistry really, that the lines on your hand will tell you your future. Although when we did it in primary school, it was like, you're going to get this here, and then you'd spit on the person's hand and say you're going to have a swimming pool. Did you guys do that? Must have just been my generation. But pretty much every single one of these things doesn't work. Okay? You know, people will say, my life's in shambles because my stars said this here. I did this with my class, and I just read them a couple of random star signs. They didn't know what it was. I was like, yeah, that was, no, but that's not even your birthday. And I think someone showed that astrology's been around for 2,000 years. The stars have actually moved. So if you're on the cusp of something, you actually should be in a new star sign. Numerology there as well. You know, your loving sire, blah, 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 blah. They're all written, this is the thing, all of these things are written in a way that you can interpret it yourself. You know, with this vibration there, you'll find equal pleasure in expressing your affections. Now, if I express my affections to people today, I'm going to lose my job. But, so that's not good advice really, is it? Go with the flow and do whatever you feel you want to do and to show your feelings. Again, if I do that in my working day, I'm in trouble. So, it's not good advice for a lot of reasons. And iridology, of course, we look there. What do we got here? Oh, you know, that's doing that, that's doing that. Oh, look, I don't even understand half of that. If your eye actually changes over time, so I suppose that's their thing saying, well, if you get healthier, there's bits there. Maybe there's a hint of truth in there, but who's to know? Of course, truth. As people will know in the US, we have this era where it's called the post-truth era, where truth isn't truth anymore. Truth has become this flexible thing. And you have basically falsified science. So one of the things here, if you look online, every year there's a list of at least 10 to 12 science scandals every year, which we'll talk about there. This one here, a guy who in 2012, what did he have? 172 scientific papers he got published in. I think it was found every single one he'd made up. And this is a really important thing here because we talk a little bit later in here about publish or perish. Working scientists actually have a hard job these days. If they don't publish papers regularly, the university says, well, what are you doing for us? So there is this pressure on scientists to, well, I've got to get my name on a paper. And that's why this fake journal stuff is coming up as well. As I said, publish or perish. So we've got here. So in China, 486 researchers guilty, okay, paid peer review. There are scientific journals. You can write a paper yourself, pay $500, and you're now a published scientist. It may be in some dodgy paper, and it may be in a journal that never peer reviews you, but it's going to be a problem there. Again, you got a whole heap there. Basically, this guy here in the US, he did dodgy papers so that he could get $1 million in research funding. Now, the stupid thing is that he's probably not pocketing that money. He's probably using it for research. But he doesn't get the money unless he publishes research, and he can't publish research unless he gets the money to do the thing there. So he does dodgy stuff to try and get in there. And I'm sure the guy probably did do it honestly, but just couldn't do it properly. And this is why this idea of peer review is important. Okay, if I published a paper and I asked all of you to peer review it, it's probably not fair because I'd probably throw a lot of this giant meta language in there just to confuse you, and you'd get halfway through it and say, yeah, just whatever, publish it. And so what you're going to do, the idea of peer review is that people look at the validity and reliability. They look at the fact that what you're saying is not garbage. And we'll look at a couple of examples in a minute here. As I said here, I've already talked about the fake science journals. Most science stuff is now published online, and you can just go to a journal online, submit your paper, pay your $500 fee, and it's published. And most of the time it's not actually peer reviewed. They just publish it straight away. We're going to ignore